Hi, this is Rick Hansen, and this is Amazing Greats. Thank you for tuning in. This week's episode, we're talking with a radio great, one of the guys who was at the very beginning and was in many ways very responsible for the advancement of contemporary Christian music and contemporary Christian radio. His name's Alan Mason, and today we have an opportunity to not only dig into the Christian radio thing, but also about his life and his own spiritual journey. So join us now as we continue on with Amazing Greats. Alan Mason is our guest on Amazing Greats. Hey, Alan. Alan is a lifelong radio executive and was largely responsible for the growth and development of the largest Christian radio network in history. We know them as K-Love and Air One. As a chief operating officer there from 2004 to 2016. You were a part of the phenomenal growth years of contemporary Christian radio across the country. Alan was chosen as one of the 50 most influential people in Christian music and the 2007 recipient of the Scott Campbell Award and the GMA Echo Award for impact on Christian music radio. Wow, what a resume.
It has been an amazing experience.
Yes. And we're going to dig into that deep here in a little while to find out more about what makes Christian radio such an amazing new phenomenon. But first, let's find out about Alan Mason, the man, and your Christian journey, because we always love to find out where all this kind of came from. So, as a kid, were you born into a Christian family? How did all that work?
I was definitely born into a Christian family. Church every Sunday, uh, Sunday school, uh, the little buttons that you would get from the Methodist Church.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I met a woman that I married 55 years ago on last Tuesday.
Hey, congratulations. That's great.
Who there's an interesting byline to that too. She was Catholic, and I was willing to become a Catholic in order to marry her because we went in and saw the priest. And the priest said, "No, I don't think we're going to do this because we don't think this will work." Wish I could find that guy now. But but yeah, Becky made sure that my wife made sure that I continued to go to church, and we tried all kinds of different churches. Uh, I will say that coming to Meridian, Idaho, I realized that one of the most difficult and frustrating things in life is trying to find a home church. Did
Yeah.
you walk into a new church, 15 minutes into it, you're going, "Oh no."
This doesn't work. Yeah.
But we're not going to get up and walk out. So we found a great church here that turns out to be about 10 minutes away. Uh, and my parents made sure that I understood what it meant to be a Christian and tried as much as possible, even during my teenage years, to keep me focused. But uh, it has been a growth journey for me, more than it's been one single thing.
Yeah.
You that part, what you and I know each other from the radio era when I was up in Seattle and with King, and there was 18 years with King doing. I was on the air. I was a general manager. I was the group program director and program director of one of the stations. So in those 18 years, I did a little bit of everything with them. Uh, and
You're playing all that heathen music back then.
we were my first job in radio was what was then called underground radio. So yes, it was
Yeah.
definitely the idea that of how Christian radio could help people on an everyday basis. This wasn't even in my mind at that point in time. It was work, and I was going to church, and there was being a Christian, work a Christian.
Yeah.
If you
So there was
fast,
no, at this point in your life, there was no really aha Jesus moment where you recognized a relationship with him.
no, the first, the relationship I felt, but the first time it became really clear was when I was a program director in Sacramento of a smooth jazz station. And at that point, there were no smooth jazz stations doing well. And I was blessed to be in the first station to hit number one 2554 and number one 12 plus in the format, which launched me into a consulting career, which brought me to the smooth jazz station in Miami, which was a part of Paxson Communications, and who hired me and brought me in as their VP of programming. And that was fascinating to me because it was the first time I had seen a Christian ownership uh, acting and running the organization in a Christian way, but he refused to do a Christian radio station. He thought they would never work. So
Is he
it,
around today?
he died knowing that there was a big difference, but
Oh,
he's
good.
not around anymore. It was it was really interesting. I'm 6'4", he's 6'8". So when I'm talking to him, I'm just like, okay.
Yeah.
But the first time I realized the active part God played in my life was at the smooth jazz station. It was not a nice place to work. Uh, and I remember going to Portland and going out walking in the snow praying, God, what do you want me to do? What should I do? What I don't understand why I'm going through this. And at that moment, I heard a voice and it said that I should bring other stations the success that I'd had.
Hmm.
So I had to stop making fun of consultants and became one. And it started out with any format, AC, rock, anything that I knew about and enjoyed it all the time. But then more and more, as stations fell off, I wound up with a core of Christian stations.
Hmm.
Uh, and it was great fun because the people you find in Christian radio are largely very different from what you would find, say, in a rock radio station. Uh,
In a good way.
yeah, in a good way, absolutely in a good way. Uh, and then Ed Paxton sold to what's now iHeartRadio, and so I went back and did some more consulting, uh, and I did some work for the K-Love Radio Network. I knew Dick Jenkins, and I knew a couple of other people there. Mike Novak had been a friend for a while, and I honestly did not want to go there. Uh, Everybody knew Dick's reputation as being a hard driver and a little bit, I'm in charge and you're not,
Oh,
uh, which is what, frankly, it took in the early days of Caleb to make it successful. You had to have really strong sense, and he did. So I decided, like I have for most of the jobs, I need to pray about this. And Becky did too. We didn't really want to go back to California and didn't really want to get into uh, a situation where Dick would be deciding my future. But the harder we prayed, the more we both knew the right thing to do was go there. So that was the time when I took a job and I really didn't know why I took it. I just
wow.
knew I just knew I was directed to go there. Uh, and then over the uh, 19 or 20 years that I was with EMF, I kept moving up until I got, see, that would be the last 5 years, 4 or 5 years, was president with Mike Novak in there as the CEO. And I think we made a pretty good team. He's a, we're both radio people and knew that we could affect people by what we did on the radio, but never realized what you could do if you built a Christian radio network in that case, or a Christian radio station that uh, affected people in ways more than that's a great song.
Yeah.
Uh, I, if you listen to Christian radio, you've heard the stories because we all have amazing stories coming in of how what happened on the radio affected them. And it took a while for us to quit saying how what we did on the radio affected them because it wasn't us. We put the pieces together for this event to happen, and it happened with them. And then working inside an environment, uh, wound up at the end with I think about 500 people, all of them Christians. It was, boy, if you ever had a need, if you ever felt a need, somebody was there to serve it. Uh, at EMF, the staff went in 3 times a day and prayed for our listeners.
Really?
Yeah.
Just to qualify, EMF is the parent
I'm sorry,
organization for
Caleb.
K-Love and Air One,
Caleb.
and they have other entities as well. But that's where you worked. Yep.
That was at that point, that was what the Educational Media Foundation was. But nobody ever has ever uses the word EMF except for those of us who are in radio. No listener or no donor ever said, "Yep, I love EMF." Uh, but it was, yeah. The we By the time I left, we had a staff of 11 pastors. Their job was to take prayers from our listeners and to talk them through the best we can. Sometimes to transfer them to somebody who could help more. But that was an amazing feeling, knowing that I'm going in, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to pray for these people. And there are people back on the other building who are helping them uh, grow in their faith and often overcome some sort of a crisis.
Yeah, that was amazing when when I listened to Caleb and they say we have pastors available right now. I mean, you can call and you can talk to somebody if you've got a problem. I love that, and that goes just one dimension beyond radio's initial purpose, if you will. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, in radio and secular radio, we want to let them have a good time and alter their mood, maybe.
yeah, yeah.
But we're
The
a
whole
shelter
the
for
whole
ourselves.
concept about being a companion. One of my mentors and radio guys, and you know the name is Pat O'Day,
Oh
and
yeah,
his whole concept behind radio was we're their companion in their car. Well, that's not existing really much anymore in secular radio, but it's a key element in Christian radio, if I'm right.
right. Yeah. I've done consulting work with a lot of Christian stations, and you hear stories over and over about how I write. We've got a phrase for it now: right song, right time. But people would be going to work and they'd hear a song, and that I remember one woman from uh, Houston who turned right around and went home and apologized to her kids for being uh, angry and short when she left. And you know, tell me another radio station that causes something like that to happen.
Yeah, yeah.
So I had this real benefit. You cannot work inside a Christian radio station and not have your faith strengthened when you're surrounded by that and you're people who get together all the time and do pray together and know what we're doing and realize that all the stuff, the good stuff that's happening out there isn't really us. We're setting the stage. We're creating the situation where people can hear something that actually does change their lives.
And that mixed with the incredible lyrics of songs, that are one right after the other with different and great messages. Most of them, by the way, seemingly pulled from Bible verses. I mean, that's kind of the theme of Christian music,
Yeah.
is pulling a theme and then building a great hit song from it.
Yeah. You're hearing that more and more now. There have been trends in the time I've been in Christian radio. There have been trends in music that have changed. And about 3 or 4 years ago, it really started to drift towards praise music. And that's so you hear that much clearer now. But there were days in the old days where we played songs like Jesus Take the Wheel because it was really hard for us to look at each other and say, that's not a Christian song. And you don't hear that kind of crossover much anymore because it's become more, I guess, more pure. Uh, but we launched a praise and worship station with Air One. because we saw the growth, and they've had their own growth with even a little bit younger audience. And there are some amazing people inside that Caleb and Air One building now, even though it's now in Nashville, uh, that are doing a great job, especially the people that work in programming. A good portion, just turned out, a good portion of the people on the air are friends of mine that I'd worked with elsewhere, somewhere else, and a terrific vice president of programming who keeps everybody focused on the right thing and makes sure we don't get too involved in it being radio.
You want to avoid that
Yeah,
altogether. But right, so one of the things we were touching on is music. So I wanted to make a comparison, and I'll have to explain a little bit about what Top 40 has always done, which is they have their hot hits, 10 or 15 songs that get played repetitiously through the day because they are the most liked and loved songs. And then they've got the B songs, which are also good, but they're not as hot as the hots. And then you have a recurrence, and then you have your oldies. Is
right.
Christian radio got some kind of uh, format like that?
Almost the exact thing.
Oh,
The one of the things you saw some tremendous growth in the Christian radio in the 2000s and since, but part of that was we brought the structure that was lacking from radio, the production values. If you go back and listen to the way songs were produced in the 70s, it just wasn't the same, didn't sound the same on the radio.
mhm.
So we brought those in and learned through the music and other research we did that, wow, these people also have songs that are their favorites, and they want to hear those more than other songs. So you'd be real, real comfortable sitting down with a clock and seeing what was going on. It's the same kind of thing that we've done for years.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, and it does seem to me that they lean. Well, I listen to K Love, and I guess local radio stations kind of do different things on their own, I'm sure. But K Love pretty much it seems really kind of more oldies based. In other words, there's songs that I haven't heard for a long time, but they're coming back more frequently, and I love that because familiarity is what, as radio guys, we know is the magic ingredient. People want to hear songs they know, love, and can sing to. But that's what love about K Love. And then all of a sudden, there's a new song that comes on, and like the old Top 40 days, it was, wait a minute, do I like this or don't I like this? And
Yeah,
pretty soon, it's in the mix, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's amazing. So contemporary Christian radio then really was kind of the vehicle that drove the music industry, the Christian music industry. Am I right?
Yep, definitely. There, these trends. I wish I could have answered the question, but I'd had a lot of label people ask me, "Okay, what's the next trend?" So, well, I'll let you know when it gets here because
Yeah.
you didn't know. But it's stabilized with the praise and worship pretty well for some time. Uh, there, as you might expect, Caleb does a really good job of music testing. Uh, I don't know if you're familiar with the digital dial system, but I think see they're using that again. And it's a little dial that the listener has in their hands. If they like the music, they turn it up. If they don't like it, they turn it down. Uh, that's some,
Interesting.
that's something everybody can understand. Where with traditional music testing, one means you don't like it, two means you like it a little bit better, five means you love it, three means you're you don't care one way or the other. That's not how people do music. That's
Yeah.
not they don't translate like that. I love this or I don't love this.
Yeah.
So that really helped. We put the music in the hands of the listeners. And far and large, that's what they decide now.
Is it K Love that kind of drives the hit Christian music for the rest of the industry? Other radio stations? Is it kind of the hub? If it's on K Love, it's a hit kind of feeling.
Yeah, there are a little over 1,000 signals for Caleb now,
Yeah.
and they drive a lot of sales and a lot of listenership. So naturally, the labels, and other radio stations pay attention to what's going on there. But everybody is doing something a little bit different. There are KLTY in Dallas is one of the premier radio stations that was that way forever in the format. And it was like I remember a time when I was consulting the smooth jazz station in Dallas, and KLTY was a Christian station, and I kept going, how are they doing this? How does this work out? Because they always manage to be a couple of rankings ahead of us. Uh, they have they have been one of the pioneers of the format and remain that way.
Hmm.
Uh,
You
KSBJ in Houston is another station that's had a great impact on that market.
you
It's
had you had mentioned Mark Ramsey in our conversation prior to this, and some had some interesting, and I thought was would be interesting to our audience to know a little bit more about. He does Mark Ramsey is a guy who is a radio guy, but he does a ton of research. You're talking about research. He does a lot of psychographics and demographics in Christian radio. Tell me that story again. You had three different kind of categories of Christian listeners.
Yeah, well, Mark realized, well, we've got a lot of demographic information, but we need to really know a little bit more about these people. So he created three psychographic categories, and I don't want to get too far into the science end of this thing, but you could do that by where they naturally fall. You don't say you're going to be here, you're going to be here. And it's been interesting that to me that the psychographic category called innocence has been the fastest growing of the past, say, 5 years. And they're the ones that are tending to not to be disaffected by church and going to church. They're not getting what they wanted. So they're in many ways using us as church. Now, we would prefer that they also go to church and establish a church. Uh, but you're not going to force anybody to do that. So it's been interesting finding out uh, that those people that we would all say are Christians are quite different. There's also a category that is a self-identified Christian. So they've said, yes, I am a Christian. But because of their responses to the questions, they're in a category called the hopeless.
Hmm.
They are they are more uh, spiritual than they are Christian, but they self-identify as Christians.
Hmm.
Still don't know what. And the third category is called the faithful, and I think that probably says it all. They do have a home church. They do go to church regularly. They are involved in small groups, as deeply as involved as you can imagine. Uh, the people in the middle who get their faith fed from radio are really important to us. And uh, it's quite a responsibility when you think about it, when you're doing the programming for a station like that, that you can change their lives by what you play and what you say. And I can't say that about any other format I've ever been in.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's incredible. So we had Mark Ramsey on as a guest on Amazing Greats at one point, and he kind of helped us walk through some of that stuff. But so the superstars of Christian music kind of evolved over the last decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. As I'd mentioned to you, and we all know is true, is when I was going to church at a Catholic church, it was all about hymns and gospel songs sung by the choir. And for me to walk into a contemporary church and hear the hits, if you will, was life changing for me, because now all of a sudden this became relevant. I mean, this is stuff that I loved and wanted to believe, and it was being sung to me in a great way. So I guess the question is how do they? There's a lot of artists out there. How do some of the artists differentiate themselves by becoming kind of the superstars, if you will, the Chris Tomlins and the Toby Macks and the Lauren Daigles? What separates them from the rest of the pack?
Well, a lot of it has to do with the messages. in their songs. There's three really good, strong praise and worship type people here, but you've also got For King and Country, who
Mhm.
I think is probably the leading uh, musical group right now, who are just brilliant at expressing their faith in different ways, in ways that, I don't know how familiar you are with their music, but Burn the Ships Down, uh, you can't go back. The ships are gone. You can't go back once you've started down this path. So there are a lot of really, really strong artists that have developed over the years. Uh, and you don't see a lot of them fading. You see a lot of them trying different styles of music, all in the Christian realm. And some works and some doesn't. But yeah, the consistent people have been around for a while.
Yeah, yeah, and I was wondering if you know the value of the live concerts in their stardom. Did the live concerts come first and then superstardom, or did superstardom come first and then they started doing concerts?
I think what happens on the radio drives concerts
Mm,
because, frankly, nobody would know about them unless it was happening on the radio. And some are, they come out, they sing their song, and it's a beautiful song. They express the emotion. And if you've ever seen For King and Country, they put on a show that's worthy of any rock band you've ever known. It's just brilliant the way they do
yeah.
that.
Oh,
Uh,
I know. And their percussion section, and the kind of the concept of the two brothers that are Australian brothers that are here just making big waves in Christian radio in America is a great story as well. But yes, I love it.
yeah,
So, uh, and Toby Mac is kind of an innovative force in Christian music.
has been for a long time. Uh, and yeah, he went through some hard times too. When his son died, for example, and he read it out in his music. He expressed what he was feeling in his music. But he's always for somebody's that I don't want to say what age he is now, but uh,
He's in his
it puts
40s or something, probably, huh? Or
he's
more.
late 40s, early 50s, somewhere. But
That's yeah,
he's
we
one of
don't want anybody telling our age, so let's
yeah,
keep his down. Yeah.
he's one of the coolest and hippest people in the format, and he just is and has been for as long as I can remember him being in the format. So he's able to break some barriers that you wouldn't find, and he does reach younger people. Well, I don't know if anyone's discussed anything like this with you, but uh, younger people are having Christian radio is having a hard time reaching younger people because they're spread out on their own new media.
Mm,
So
mm,
if you want to know who the audience is, it's generally baby boomers, and they're the they're the one that are the huge fans. Uh, if you have a successful station, you find out that about 25% of your people produce 75 to 80% of your quarter hours. So
mm. Wow, interesting. That
interesting format. It's not a Cume driven format. It's a fan driven format.
which means they listen longer, not more people, but they always listen longer because they're huge fans.
They're at your promotions. They're on your telephone. They're not passive about their Christian radio stations.
So that was one of my questions when I was going to get to some cultural questions, but you've jumped right in there, and that I'll ask it now, and that is the falling, seemingly by research, the falling away of young people from Christianity, whether it's attendance at church or whatever. And what you've just said kind of supports that, although they may not be radio guys or gals, but they may be Christian guys or gals who are listening to it on Pandora or Spotify or one of the streaming services. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, Spotify does a really good job, and they're they have a great Christian section there with styles of Christian music that you would never thought of you would have heard of. So uh, it all works together. They are reaching a somewhat younger audience, but the older audience at the same time. Uh, you and I grew up in the radio era, and radio will always be our preferred media.
Yeah.
Millennials and Gen Z didn't. They grew up they're digital natives. They're not people who had to learn how to work a computer. I don't know how it works that I have a 3-year-old great granddaughter who already knows how to work the iPhone and play games on it. It's just, it's very different. And radio companies are going to need to address that and realize that they need to create media for that generation rather than trying to talk that generation into listening to radio.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of the issue too is that, well, part of the downside to a streaming service as opposed to what you're talking about at K-Love and Air One is that they don't get the companion along with the music, which is like we're talking about, is a powerful ingredient in what Christian radio is. And I don't know that they'll ever be able to really do that in a streaming scenario. Maybe they can somewhere along the line. I don't know. Um,
Yeah, there will be relevant. There will be hosts, announcers, whatever you want to call them, that are relevant to that audience, and they will get attention. It's really hard to be everything to everybody.
mhm,
Uh,
exactly.
the culturally, I don't know if you're how where you are Barna research or if you've had anybody from Barna on here, but
No.
uh, they do a lot of research in the Christian world, and right now there's a lot of worry about pastors uh, that are stuck in I'm not sure what to say because if I say the wrong thing, they're going to be mad. And I say another wrong thing, they're going to be mad. And then the Christian nationalists are going to get mad at everything I say. And we're losing pastors going off to other types of work because they don't know how to overcome the division that it's not only in America, but it's also in their churches.
Well, that was one of my other cultural questions, and you're beating me to all my questions before I even get there. That was one of my other questions, which was, what about the politic nature of Christianity today? It seems like there's this like just like in the overall culture, there's a split, there's a divide between conservative Christians and the more liberal Christians. Do you sense that that's true? And what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it has become largely conservative. And that's what happened to Jesus Take the Wheel, is because it was not by a Christian artist, about an artist who mayhaps has done some things that they shouldn't have. And they've been ruled out. So the conservative end has a lot of control right now of what's going on Christian radio. Uh, you've been in this situation before. You say the wrong thing on the radio, and somebody will call you and tell you all about it. And they have that in spades if they happen to trip into the wrong area. Now, if you start in a biblical sense, Jesus was really big on saying, love everybody. Love, as you love me, love others. By
Yeah.
doing so, that's how you'll become known as my followers. So there's a real dichotomy there
Yeah.
because you can't go on the radio and say you love everyone without fielding a lot of calls. They're going to wind up turning into something bigger, turning this into something bigger and a boycott, a protest. So it's a much tougher place to be now than it was 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah. Well, you come from a group of heathens that started all of this contemporary Christian radio stuff, including one of my prior guests, which was Bob Anthony.
Oh,
Uh,
Bob had great influence on me. Yeah.
yeah, and he and then and Mike Novak, you've already mentioned. Mike Novak is so it's kind of the three amigos that were top 40 uh, formerly, and then went to Christian radio and kind of brought top 40 with them in a lot of ways. Uh, the quick so Bob was a guest, and he was, I guess, the guy who originally started what is now K-Love, because he left KFRC, a hot top 40 radio station, out of the
Yeah.
blue with a call from God, and decided to make one little radio station a Christian station with a contemporary format, and then it's grown substantially from there. And you were a part of, he was maybe a part of the beginning. You were definitely a part of the explosion in the 2000s.
Yeah, there's another name there called David Pierce. David is uh, chief of media now of K11 Air One, and he was at KLTY in the beginning, and he is one of the true pioneers of the format, who's still in there and still going. I don't know if you've heard of a guy named John Frost, but
No.
John is the premier Christian radio consultant, and he also has had a huge impact on the format and the people who are programming today. So we need to keep those people around.
Yeah.
And I keep poking them a little bit about, hey, who's your replacement? You have to realize you won't be, it's biblical too. You won't be around forever.
Yeah. So you are one of the ones that have decided to sit on the retirement couch in beautiful Meridian, Idaho, and now sitting there and kind of observing. What would be the one thing you might tell a young program director who is, running a radio station in Iowa or someone in Bellingham? Uh, is there a tip you'd give them? Is there something that you would say this is this is important?
Yeah, it's something an old friend named Tommy Kramer has said, and be the moon, not the sun. So
Ah,
reflect what you're hearing from your listeners. Don't try to be the thing that changes the listeners' minds. Reflect what they're doing. There are a lot of people who think in Christian radio, we need to do more. We need to get them into church. We need to, well, I'm not sure that was our job. I think our job is setting the stage. And let's not forget that while what we do is important, is let's leave some room for Jesus in there too, because he's the one who really makes the change on the people outside the audience.
speaking of a great metaphor, that's the metaphor for Jesus himself. For us, is he's the sun. We're the moon. We're hopefully reflecting what he's all about. So totally love that. How about a God wink? Something along the line you said. Oh, you already mentioned a couple, but maybe if you have any others, God really showed up this time. I mean, this is craziness right here.
Well, this is an oddball thing for a radio person. I gave 3 years notice on my retirement, and that was spurred by what I felt.
Hmm.
There's the message I got is there's a time to leave. There's a time and a season for things. There's a time to leave. There's a time to let other younger people come in and learn and do the same way you did. So it was an odd retirement in that I didn't leave going, finally, I'm free. I can do whatever I want. And I also I wasn't inordinately sad. Uh, I still do a few projects, and I don't talk about the stations I do them with. It's That's not important. The fact that they get better is important. But yeah, I'm largely retired. Uh, I took my second 2 week vacation just last week. I've only done that twice in my life. When you can't do it when you're in radio. A week is a long time, and I've got to get back and see what's going on.
Yeah.
So it's changed it. Uh, it's my wife and several grandchildren and several great grandchildren are the center of our lives right now. But as you have done, you can't really totally get away from radio.
Yeah,
You
I
can't
know.
you can't get away from what you've done all your life.
My podcast is my release here.
It's a
It's
great idea too. It's a good one. You're right on the leading edge of a very important way to reach younger people.
yeah. Well, coolness. This has been a great conversation. You are, one of those guys who everybody I talk to in radio says, "Oh yeah, I know Alan Mason." And especially in the Christian realm, but also in secular. And so it's just a real honor to be able to chat with you and to get your story and to find out a whole lot more about Christian radio than we knew before. So thank you so much for your time.
And I thank you for the opportunity. And I don't know this, everybody else doesn't know this. You and I worked in the same market and never met in that market, but we knew each other.
And we competed against each other.
Yeah.
For those who are local in our area, Alan was right at the helm of King Radio when they were top 40, and I was across the street at KJR at the time. And so, yeah, we knew the names of one another, but didn't really know each other back then.
Well, and I'm glad to see that we're both doing Christian things as we get to this stage in our lives.
Yeah, and we're both still alive.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alan. Have a great rest of your day and a great weekend. And we'll have this published shortly. Again, God bless. Thank you.
Thank you. No problem at all.
Great conversation with Alan Mason, our guest on Amazing Greats. Thanks for tuning in. My name's Rick Hansen. Remember to hit subscribe, hit like, share with your friends, and we'll see you back here again on Amazing Greats on our next episode. God bless.